Okay, Cambrai 1917, the first Blitzkrieg. This is a reprint of the 1974 Rand game. I have a special fondness for Rand designs, and I've wanted this one for quite a while. And I'm never willing to pay the premium that it gets because I could see, you know, it's not something like the Great War, which of course has its own issues, but you know, I could have seen picking that up at a premium, but this one a little less so. But I got lucky. Kerry Anderson over at MDG. So I saw him at one of the Consim World Expos, and he runs the SPI Wrecking Yard or something like that too. He has some rights to print some of these games, and this is one that he chose to sell, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. Let me get a modern version of it. I don't know. I mean, I've looked at the original version, pictures of it and stuff, and obviously this is different. The big thing is he did a counter and map redesign, well, mainly counter redesign. And they're pretty counters. I have a little bit of trouble. I can't zoom. That would be dangerous. Up here is the setup space. Some of the values, you know, that's something you only have to look at once if you're playing the scenario that uses the historical setup. All right, this is a fairly simple wargame. What are we looking at here? 12 pages of rules total, and bigger type. So, you know. Probably about 6 pages in a normal rule book, in the original, say. Maybe less because Rand tended to do really tiny print. We got an attack and defense strength. I think that's the major important piece of information on there. Tanks are treated specially. We'll deal with them in a moment. Well, maybe more than a moment. You got the train effects chart here. Turn track. Nicest space for all the reinforcements to come in. The setup hexes use letters. I don't know if the original had numbers in the hexes. Numbers had been invented already, but you know. The movement allowance is not printed on the counters. Everything has a movement of 4 except for cavalry, which are distinguished this way, with the kind of something reminiscent of the slash, the NATO symbol, or it's actually pre-NATO, but whatever. Cavalry have a movement allowance of 7. All right, a few concepts that are here. We don't need to talk about that. One of them is a little weird, which is consolidation, which is basically turning an enemy's trench into your own, sort of. Okay. Sequence of play, the Brits go first. They get their reinforcements phase, then movement, then combat. Reinforcements are listed. They all come on the Bapaume Road. Except for turn 13, which comes on the Albert Road. Let's see if we can find the Bapaume Road. This is not easy. Oh, they got turn 13 here, so I would expect there to be something, but I'm not seeing it. This is Canal du Nord. Wow. Okay, so that's going to take me some effort to try to find. Is there some place called Bapaume? I don't know. All right. I am finding that this is not the easiest map and counters to read. Not just that little number, but I tried throwing some plexi over it. You can see I get some glare because of my overhead lights, no matter what. And, well, there's not a lot of gloss on this, so it's It's just my lighting. But with the Plexi, it was unplayable. I had to take everything up off setup. What do we got here? The British player then gets to move all his units. Then he may attack. It's not mandatory. And then there's a roll for, and this is going to be kind of painful. You have to go through each of the tank battalions on the map and make a roll for them to see if they break down. If they break down, they can be repaired. Then the German gets a player turn where they follow everything except the tank attrition. And then we move down the phase to the next turn. Anything exciting about movement? We got the movement point costs listed here. There is a little bit here. There are going to be zones of control. You can't enter an enemy hex. Okay, road movement in this. So you can use the road movement rate for this, which is 1 movement point per hex traveled on it, but you can only use this if you're traveling long, obviously. But there's something here. I'm looking for the exception. You can't use it to enter a road or town hex. Oh, the road movement transits towns as well. They have roads all through them, though. So, you may not use it if you're moving adjacent to a friendly unit, also on the road or in a town adjacent to it. Indicating there's too much congestion. Canal hex sides. That's this probably. Dry canal. I don't see it. There's a wet canal. And they have costs. Tanks have trouble going through canals. We also have special effects listed here. Tanks only have their attack strength when attacking across. All units have their attack strength when attacking across. It's going to take some time to get used to the terrain effects because they're spread out in this chart. It's not a really simple chart for me to assess. We also have 4 different combat charts, which is kind of neat. If you move adjacent to an enemy unit, you have to pay an extra movement point. Let's see if I can remember that. When reinforcements come on the map, they're placed, the British are placed, and this counts as their first hex of movement for the turn. They arrive on 0105. That's here. Okay, that would have been helpful to mark, given that the other one's marked. Oh. And then they lie here about turn 12, which is an error. If the Germans are blocking it, the British units can enter to the nearest unblocked hex. Germans are placed on any hex of the town of Cambrai, not in a British zone. This does not count against their movement. If all the hexes of Cambrai are blocked by zones or British units, then they can be placed on a road hex adjacent to the north or east edge of the map. That's not our British zone of control. These will count as movement. So you can kind of teleport into Cambrai. The initial placement during reinforcements is not subject to stacking limitations, and you can delay them. British cavalry cannot move on the first turn. They were confused. Stacking. Base stacking is 1 unit per hex, with one exception. The British can stack tank units. I believe it's 2 extra tank units in with an infantry division. You can actually use cav divisions for that too. The French also have a handful of units which might be present in the game. Not all cav. And they may or may not show up. Zones of control, 6 adjacent hexes, only infantry. You have to pay You have to halt when you enter a zone of control, and you cannot move further. You cannot move directly from one zone to another, enemy zones. And they block retreat routes, but they don't block advances after combat. They block supply unless you have a friendly unit covering your supply line. If you're adjacent to somebody, you can declare an attack. You have to be in supply in order to attack. You determine the odds, which look like simple, 1 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 1, whatever. No in-betweens. You get to choose which CRT you're using within some restrictions. That choice, you could always pick standard or probe. Mobile, you can only use if it is at least half the units attacking are stacked with tanks. Divisions, I guess. And the Germans can only use it if at least half the units have an attack strength of 6. Any units with an attack strength of 6, and there aren't any on the beginning of the game, are Strasstruppen. And this is kind of an interesting battle. It's the first major tank battle, and that's what it's kind of known for, but it's also the counterattack that the Germans provide is the first use of the infiltration tactics on the West Front. You get results here. So an AE, attacker eliminated. You get retreats there, AR1, DR1. CA is a counterattack. You either retreat a hex or counterattack. And this can pass back and forth for a while. Exchange, the weaker side is eliminated. The other side must take at least as much combat strength. This is going to be unmodified combat strength. Movement after combat. If a retreat happens, you can't retreat into an enemy zone of control unless you have friendly units in the space. You cannot retreat into a space that would exceed stacking. If you cannot retreat, you're destroyed. If you're forced to retreat off the map edge, you can do so, however, and you'll show back up as reinforcements. Along the same map edge, not within an enemy zone of control, nor out of supply. You cannot retreat in a manner that you would be further away from your supply source. Hey, where's the supply? We're getting there, we're getting there. Okay. Advance after combat. After the defenders have vacated a hex, you're allowed to then advance one or more of your attacking units into the vacated hex, subject to stacking rules. So normally that would be, yeah, the Brits can throw some tanks in if they want, in addition to the infantry. But there's more to that. You can ignore enemy zones of control for this, so you can slip from one zone to another on an advance. However, tanks give you a special rule. If attacking tank battalions and all units stacked with them can advance, if they destroy the German unit, all tank battalions and attacking units stacked with them can advance up to 2 hexes instead of just the 1. They still have to first advance into the first hex they take. Tanks can advance over canals. If 2 or more British units are attacked together, only one of them can defend. However, if they have to counterattack, they can all counterattack together. No unit can have its defense strength more than doubled. However, the defense strength can be doubled and the attacker hitting them can be halved. Supplies. The British supply is any hex on the west edge, and I'm going to assume that's here. Yep. Germans, anywhere on the east, any hex in Cambrai, any hex on the east of the map, or north and south edges that are east of the initial German line. And you can see there's some depth to these trenches, right? We got several lines of trench works. What do those do? Cheap for infantry and tanks. The defender's DS doubled. Defensive strength in friendly and consolidated enemy trenches. Yeah. Remember, you can take over enemy trenches. Okay. French draw supplies from the English spaces. Cambrai cannot be used as a supply source if it's surrounded or occupied by British units or zones of control. Okay, tracing your supply. This can be any length, but can't pass through occupied or adjacent to enemy units unless they're also occupied by the friendly unit. If you're not in supply, you can't attack. You don't have a zone of control. If you're forced to counterattack and you're not able to withdraw, remember you have the option to withdraw instead of counterattacking, you must attack using half your normal attack strength. Supply doesn't affect your defensive strength. Tankses. During tank attrition phase, the British player rolls a die. On turn 1, on a 1 or 2, and he does this for each tank. That tank is broken down. Otherwise, it's going to just be on a 1. And they'll be removed from the map for 5 turns. You can just put them on the game track for when they come in. After the 5 turns, the tanks are now repaired. They can be placed in any hex 3 or more hexes west of the original British front line. At no movement point cost, and they're placed during reinforcements, and they can move normally that turn. You may not delay them. Tanks that are destroyed due to combat are permanently destroyed. Any tank is subject to tank attrition while unsupplied, however, is destroyed because it can't find a way back. Infiltration. The German infantry divisions with a strength of 6 and a defense strength of 4 are Strasstruppen. What's about them? I don't know. A British unit can be pinned. Some additional counters here. We have these pinned counters. If during the movement phase the German player commits enough units to a 1-to-1 attack against the British unit. When it's pinned, German infiltration divisions can then walk through its zone of control for all purposes. The infiltration units can move, trace supply, and retreat through the zone of control of the pinned unit. They do not have to pay extra movement points to move adjacent to the pinned units. During the German combat phase, the committed German units that got that 1-to-1 or better attack must attack the pinned units, and then the pinned status will be removed. So you may want to choose your order of combat carefully there, so you can retreat with your infiltration. The French. The turn after the Germans announce their counterattack, both sides are going to have a special attack phase. The British, at the beginning of the game, have a surprise, but then the German counterattack with the Strasstruppen involved is surprising the British as well. We'll get to that, I hope, in a moment. I don't see it yet. You know, we may have skipped it. It was back in the combat table selection. The surprise attack. The surprise, okay. Each player has 3 separate surprise attack turns. For the British, it's going to be turns 1 through 3. The Germans can announce before the movement phase of any turn that they're launching their surprise attack. For those 3 turns, the German player can use the surprise CRT table. And there's a counterattack marker, which we put down to indicate how long that's going to last. Okay. The turn after the German player has announced his counterattack, the British roll a die. On a 1, they get those 5 French divisions on the Perron Road, 0215. I guess that's down here. And they're treated as normal reinforcements, except they can't attack while stacked with the tanks. Cav raids. The British were hoping to get an in-depth attack and get their cavalry into the backside of the Germans and cause all kind of disruption there. When you succeed in exiting the north edge of the map east of Boulogne, here, then you may exit you get a little marker that indicates you exited, and this will match the number of the cavalry division. And you put that sucker on the hex that you left from. You have to stay off the map for 4 turns, and then you return to the map on the hex you exited from or an adjacent hex. The Cav units may not re-enter the map if their entry hexes are blocked by German units or uncontested zone of control. If the re-entry hex of a Cav division is blocked, it can re-enter whenever the re-entry hex is unblocked. However, if it gets trapped for more than 6 turns, now that's not clearly stated here. What does trapped mean? Does that mean more than 6 turns after when it was supposed to come back, or something else? I honestly don't know the answer to that. I don't see an easy way to determine that. There wasn't, I didn't see any errata. It strikes me that the amount of time that you'd be back behind enemy lines, that 4 turns is probably kind of pushing it. So 6 turns, I would say, is the 2 turns more than the 4 turns rather than a total of 10 turns. But I'm not sure. And it would have to be trapped, which means the enemy would have to actually block it for that whole time. So that seems really hard to discern, whereas I could see being able to track that you've been gone for 10, for 6 turns beyond when you expected to come in, which is probably how I'm going to do it. Consolidation. When you capture an enemy trench, you can take it over, but only with infantry. It takes the unit 2 turns of neither moving nor attacking, nor being attacked. At the end of each of his movement phases, you place a consolidation marker at the back end of the entrenchment. If it spent its whole turn in an enemy trench, at the end of the second turn, which doesn't have to be consecutive, you put it right side up on top of the unit, and now that unit gets the defensive bonuses of the trench in addition to the enemy. The enemy can unconsolidate a trench. It already has the defensive benefits because there's plenty of, built-up defenses facing the enemy. But they can spend the same 2 turns to unconsolidate an enemy breastworks that have been built on the other side of the trench, essentially, and basically break them down. Otherwise, they're going to be permanent there. If you move at them, they stay. If you have to move or engage in combat while consolidating, you don't succeed. You don't succeed in advancing its progress, but you can keep the hex there. All right, what's victory in the game? Well, 5 victory points. Okay, so there's 2 kinds of victory in this game, and that's kind of neat. They have a tactical victory and a strategic victory. Let's talk about the strategic first. The British player wins if he occupies 2 hexes of Cambrai in supply at the end of the game. German player wins if he has 3 town hexes west of the original British front line in supply at the end of the game. The other side counts up points for things. So each German division with a strength of 2 is worth 5. All other German divisions are worth 10. Cavalry raids are worth 5 each. Making it to the north edge of the map between Boulogne and the east edge, or adjacent to the east edge, within 6 hexes of the north edge at the end of the game. So if you're down to about there, those are worth 5. 5 for each town hex east of the German frontline trench that you were the last to pass through or occupy. 2 for each ridge hex east of the German frontline trench. What the hell are ridge hexes? Well, they're probably these, and they give you a defensive bonus, doubling. The Germans get 10 for each British infantry they destroy, 8 for each cav, 4 for each tank battalion, 12 for each cav unit that exits the map and can't re-enter. And I think if it gets stuck by the end of the game, you'd get those points anyway. 10 for each town hex west of the British front line that the Germans get, and 6 for each ridge west of the British front line that a German unit was the last to go through. If you were unsupplied for 5 or more turns, no easy way to track this. I'll have to use number markers from something else or something. There are some excess counters here. There's an extra British unit that corresponds with some of these option chips. There's some historical I guess ahistorical options. It's not absolutely clear. They call them historic, but some of them seem like maybe they should be applied in the historical scenario. I'm going to just play the base game, see what goes down with that. Although that would definitely, especially with random options, which is what the chits are for, that would definitely make for a little bit more playability than most of these little tactical games have. I don't know if I really need that, but okay. You count your victory points. If you have the most, you get a tactical victory. However, if the British player wins and doesn't get 150% or more of the German total victory points, he hasn't really changed the situation enough to qualify as a major victory, even if it's interesting enough that tanks will receive more, more research. So back to the idea of the historic options. Basically, you have a bunch of these counters that have letters on them. I think the British player draws them. He has some that are secret. Alternatively, you could just, pick some, which is also suggested in the rules. But pick one of these chits, and it has some letters on it. One of them, some of them may be pro-German, some of them may not. If there's a mixture of starred and unstarred, the Brits might have to announce the unstarred ones. But it gives you a number of different opportunities there. For example, like the Brits already have infiltration tactics. Hey, some of those are pretty big. However, some of them look like maybe they're intended to be more historical than otherwise. The British use of reserves was erratic and poorly organized. This is different from the British. Well, I'm not sure. Yeah, the British were slowly moving towards the development of infiltration tactics themselves. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that they should have them. The first mobile battle in 3 years, the British suffered many communications failures. But on other ones, had the Battle of Passchendaele continued much any longer, the British would have been faced with an acute supply problem. But even as it was, such a problem did exist. What? Should this be historical or not? Obviously, there are some that shouldn't. The Cambrai attack was originally conceived as a massive raid, Impressive breakthroughs in tank development occurred in the last months of 18. If this had occurred a year or so earlier, so some of them sound less, they sound like they shouldn't be part of the historical game. Others sound like maybe they should be, and there should be a pick for that, but there's nothing that indicates that. It's an option for hidden movement where basically you flip your counters over, and until the enemy is adjacent to you, nobody knows quite what you have. And a little bit of historical information on here. Anyway, I want to see how the base game goes and whether it's, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's anything breathtaking for 74, but on the other hand, so far it sounds pretty sturdy. So let's send this up.